Ross Chastain used the wall all the way around this racetrack.
Logano has been the class of the field.
Check out the big brain on Brad.
Yeah, I need to change my underwear.
With Sin City in the rear view, it's time to turn our attentions to South Beach. Brian and I are in to break down the Pennzoil 400, what we learned trackside in Vegas. I am obviously back in the friendly confines of my home office, which is very nice with my screens. Trying to navigate everything on a laptop screen is less than ideal, but it's good to be back. And then obviously Brian's still in Vegas before he hops on a jet and takes off to South Beach to follow his favorite drivers. Brian Twining, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great, my friend. I mean, we got Homestead this weekend, quite possibly one of the top 3 tracks on the schedule. It's the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. Of course, I got a horrible first round game for Michigan playing a very hot UC San Diego squad that a lot of people are picking the upset. But thankfully for me, the majority of my attention will be placed at the 1.5 mile, I guess you would say, rectangular track of Homestead. So, even if they lose, I think I'll be preoccupied with what's going on down in Miami.
Yeah. So we'll jump into this week's race. Obviously, Straight Talk Wireless 400. Talk about the outright bets that we're looking at, the way the market's moving early, and also just kind of expectations for a race that's not usually at this time of year. But let's talk Pennzoil 400 first, because everybody seemed to have a really poor week. There was maybe like 2 or 3 Josh Berry tickets I saw on X, which is very on brand. 2 stages of very predictable, expected, kind of playing out the way we thought it would. Couple late cautions, couple weird things, couple pit cycles, and all of a sudden it's Josh Berry 1, Daniel Suarez 2, Ryan Preece
3.
Like, that's like, if you told me that was the winner of the stage 2 at Coda while everyone else is pitting, I'd be like, that makes sense. But at 1.5 miles at the end of the race?
Yeah, honestly, it's one of the more surprising race finishes that I've experienced while being a fan of the sport and like betting it. But I don't even think that's the most surprising outcomes of the weekend. I think when you look at the race as a whole, the biggest storyline and biggest surprise to me was the complete lack of speed out of JGR.
Yeah.
Ty Gibbs was atrocious. Christopher Bell, who came into the week with the second shortest odds, possibly even the shortest at some books, was a non-factor the entire day. Denny Hamlin was fighting for last place after he got penalized. He could barely even get through the field. And then Chase Briscoe, has the problem early, loses a tire. Everybody thinks he's going to be multiple laps down, and somehow he winds up finishing as the top second best top JGR car, when he had 0 speed. 2311, completely different. Both Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick were bad fast, and had Bubba not been involved in that weird 4-wide wreck whose fault we still don't know whose it is, Bubba probably comes home top 10, and then Reddick, maybe strategy plays out a little bit differently. He's probably competing inside the top 5. So I think the JGR issues, which have kind of compounded the last couple of weeks, are the biggest storyline as we head to Homestead, because those guys look non-competitive from a speed standpoint.
Yeah, it's weird too, because like Gibbs and Briscoe obviously have been pretty bad to start the year, but we're like, that's more of a Gibbs and Briscoe problem, not a JGR problem. But when Denny's having issues, and Bell, there was one point, I think in stage 2, where it did look like he was going to find some speed and he was moving through the field and all that kind of stuff. And then I forget it, did he have a penalty or something for a pit cycle or something, and he ends up back in traffic. And it was weird too, and we'll probably hear about it. And I think Goodyear and NASCAR are going to work together on the tires, but Larson was a rocket ship for 2 stages, got stuck in traffic, couldn't get out of it. Byron looked really good at points, got stuck in traffic, couldn't really get out of it. Chris Bell at one point looked really fast, and we're like, okay, here he comes, gets stuck in traffic, can't really get out of it.
Ryan Blaney. Yep.
Was probably the best car for most of the day, and I think if he gets to run that thing green, he's challenging for sure. But as you mentioned, the 4 wide shenanigans, he ends up in the wall again, messing with the squirrels, and boom, his day is done. So obviously a really, really tough run for him. The Trackhouse boys showed up. That was good to see. We'll talk about some of our bets here in a bit. But yeah, real weird race. Obviously Josh Berry getting there at the end was interesting. The first time winner at Las Vegas Motor Speedway ever. So that was pretty wild.
Well, and I think that just goes to show you, like, Las Vegas has always catered to the best of the best or the fastest of the fastest cars in the series. And it took a kind of a weird caution point of stage 3 and differing strategies amongst the leaders for this to kind of play out this direction. I mean, when you looked at that final run, I don't think you could really argue the fact that this race is Tyler Reddick's or Denny Hamlin's to lose if they also stay out with Josh Berry, Daniel Suarez, and Ryan Preece at the end, because as we were going further and further through stage 3, it became quite clear that it was those 2 guys who were kind of the fastest cars amongst the group that was on that run long strategy.
Yeah.
And also, too, for me, that's quite concerning. Like, I know they used a different left side tire, but this is something that I was hearkening on going into the race, that in Las Vegas, once things get strung out, it really doesn't matter how fast your car is. Passing is like almost impossible with the dirty air in Sin City. And so, you got to see it with Larson, with Byron, who were able to make up a few positions. But once they decided to pit with like 70 to go and we had that caution, instead of staying out and trying to run this thing long, they couldn't go anywhere. They were stuck. And so, I don't know if it means we need a softer tire on both the left and the rights to increase tire wear and tire management here, because the track clearly doesn't eat tires fast enough for it to make a difference, or what. But the racing product, something we've seen in Vegas. I love the track. I love the race itself, but it's not always the best in terms of that, because it's not about speed. It's about track position.
Yeah, and it was weird too because it did seem like you could easily get to like kind of that back end of the top 10 pretty quickly, like 12, 13, something like that.
And then
But
once there, you hit a wall.
It was like there was a barricade piece of plastic there that you just couldn't get through to get to the next wave.
Yeah, it was Oscar the Grouch holding up a clear plastic bag this year, telling everybody, "Oh, sorry, it looks like you could get through, but you can't."
Yeah, yeah. And I thought with Logano getting to the front, I was like, "Oh baby, here we go." Joseph's gonna find himself in victory lane once again. It felt like a weird race he was gonna win, and
yeah, it sure did. You're right.
obviously,
When they started talking about fuel strategy and he started going through the field, I had at one point I told Kyle I'm walking out of the media center and I'm never covering a race again if he wins this. So thankfully, Joey helped me out. Had a little pit road problems to his detriment, which kind of sucked because he was having a good day. But yeah.
As someone holding it outright, it was going to be a party in the press box if he gets to victory lane, and Brian was going to be very sad. So let's look at the betting card. So Hamlin, I had Reddick. We grabbed just because of 10-1. He looked really good at points. He was ripping the high line at points.
Yeah.
By stage 3, it was kind of gone. Hamlin over Blaney was our cash. Probably a good result, bad bet.
Definite bad bet. If you've caught Denny's actions detrimental post race, or if you haven't, I highly recommend go watch this. He admitted they had absolutely nothing for Blaney when they both went a lap down after sustaining after Blaney had the bad pit stop, and then Hamlin got penalized on pit road and had to go a lap down. And they were fighting for the lucky dog. He said, like, we had nothing for the 12 team. So
through a Denny Bell Gibbs, which was a horrible week to go in on JGR at 65 to
right.
1 because the post rate or the post practice and qualifying numbers were shit. Like we couldn't find value really. I found a Gregson top 10 at 6 to 1 thanks to Fanduel. And I think if he gets to finish out that race, he's probably flirting with the top 10. So I feel pretty good about that bet. But overall, it was a rough week, especially with some of the pre-practice and qualifying. Gibbs
Yeah, I
under
will
7.
say I I will say there was one line that I saw early Sunday morning which I sent out to some people through work. Alex Bowman over under was posted at 10.5 over on Caesars at just minus 115. And that I did say was a good bet because personally I had Bowman plus 120 top 10 from our favorite offshore. So I did like that one, but outside of that, like you said, there wasn't a ton of value post practice and qualifying, and books have really been squeezing the board, especially near the top early on this year.
Yeah, and we also grabbed Chastain prior, which was nice at plus money, and then obviously
Yeah.
those numbers came out. But yeah, Reddick, Chastain was good. I
I don't think he was a threat to win, but
yeah,
again,
he was he was a
definite
top
top 10
10 car
car.
all day,
Yeah.
flirting with top 5. The Gibbs, I mean, I will have to figure out what we're gonna do with JGR this week because like maybe the team's just amassing Chris Bell's just that good, or maybe all their attention's I don't know what's going on, but
Yeah,
it's weird
I
that they came into this race with 3
yep.
straight wins, and the team was seemingly so like just confused about what to do.
Well, I think the biggest surprise about it is the fact that it was at a 1.5, where Toyotas, I think you can say in the Gen 7 era, or at least since 2022, the last 2 years have been fast as hell. Like, how did they miss so bad is a question that I have. And it's really baffling to see how bad they were on Sunday.
Yeah, and I guess we should have known on Saturday when McDowell's on the pole, and we just kept waiting for people to go around him and qualify higher, and just never happened.
Yeah.
It was a weird weekend, and maybe moving it up a couple weeks or a week. Um,
So Vegas was actually moved back 2 weeks.
so it's usually earlier.
So Vegas has traditionally been the third race of the
Okay.
year. It's always been like Daytona, Atlanta, Vegas, Phoenix. This year they added Coda in there, and then they went to Phoenix first, then Vegas, and yeah,
Do you think
the
the change in the schedule had anything to do with it? I guess weather-wise, it was
nah,
kind of the same, right?
yeah, I would say it was unseasonably warm on Sunday when
That's
the last
true.
2 years I've been here on the spring, it's been cold as hell.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that threw it off. Who knows? Um, Obviously, in being in Vegas, we couldn't play any DraftKings. We had some good stuff. I think, Suarez was a guy I wrote up, but we also were in on Tyrone Gibbs, which was
Ugh,
awful.
disgusting.
Um, you know, we weren't necessarily off of Ryan Blaney, but we are thinking he's going to be very popular in tournaments. And if you wanted to pivot off him, we wouldn't blame you. Obviously, it worked out, but I think if we run that race a bunch more, it ends up not being the right play. Um, any other Pennzoil 400 takeaways before we shift focus and talk a little straight talk wireless 400?
Yeah, I do think that it was interesting in the media center. Drivers got this question a lot, but how do they correlate these early season races at tracks that you go to later in the year? And I would say the majority of them, if not all of them, all agree that you gather data this weekend in Vegas or say Phoenix for the fall events, but you can't necessarily take this stuff and just translate it over into the fall, because by the time we get here again, the tracks have been sitting for months of extremely hot weather. There's been a bunch of other races that have been on it, weathering the track more. And so, obviously you can they take the data to see where they can improve and what changes to make. But especially with Vegas, you've seen it. The spring performers don't necessarily always perform in the fall and vice versa.
Yeah, Kyle Busch even pointed out in his presser, like it bakes all summer long, and when we come back for the fall, the track's completely different.
Yeah, it's slicker, so the speeds are
Mhm.
slower. Like, yeah.
I also thought it was interesting, like Byron was saying, he doesn't really, even with the new shift to the playoff schedule and like kind of expectations there, he wasn't really like super like, oh, this is going to be way different come when we come back in the fall, or I'm putting extra pressure on myself to do well here with the nonsense around there. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But
Well, and I
um,
think too, it's because teams like, even though this race was pushed back compared to where it's been in the past, like teams are still evaluating themselves. They're still trying to get a handle of what we're doing, especially considering this is the first time we've started a season with 2 super speedways and then a road course. I mean, you don't really have a good handle on what your car is going to bring to an oval. And with this being essentially the first oval, because it's the first time we've ran Phoenix before Vegas too.
yeah,
It was kind of a time for them to see what they've got, and adjustments will be made after this week going forward.
it's weird though because I was excited because I was like, oh, this will be great because we'll get some information and then we'll go to Miami and Darlington and Martinsville and kind of get that streak going and get a lot of be able to make decisions based off of that. I don't think we could take anything away from this race. Like
Yeah,
I
I
literally
I was
Blaney
just
was
gonna say
good.
I'm pretty sure that JGR, like, I mean, as we go and we look at odds here, even the books have kind of made a slight adjustment.
Yeah.
But I think that we're gonna see them make like wholesale changes to this package immediately, because
Yeah.
what we saw in Las Vegas, here in Vegas, that is not going to cut it.
All right. Well, let's talk straight talk wireless 400 odds. We can run through it all and make some decisions because it's going to be interesting how aggressive we want to get. Let me see if I can shrink this a little bit to make it look better. Yeah, that looks better. Nope, we don't want that. Thank you. There we go. All right, that looks a little better. Yeah, because we're gonna have some interesting decisions to make, and we're gonna be able to. Do we want to gamble on JGR figuring it out between last week and this week? Do we want to assume that they're going to be trash and wait to see it because then we won't get the good numbers? We'll have to figure that out. So Larson is like basically between 3 and 4 most places. It looks like Fanduel has a 5. Um, Obviously incredible here. Should be amazing come Sunday. Reddick, Blaney, Byron, Bell, and then we get into double digits. So let's talk Larson and the bees, and or I guess Larson Reddick and the bees. Um, everybody who's won a race last name starts with B. So are we just gonna fire off on the guys that haven't won? A Byron, a Busher. I mean, I guess what is your thoughts on this range, and then kind of um, what are we doing? Because there even with Bell,
Yeah,
like he's
yeah,
850, 650, but then 11. Like, what do we do with him?
yeah. So I think because of us having zero handle on what we're going to see with us going to Homestead here in the spring, with considering the last time we did this was in 2021, COVID year, no qualifying. They just went out on the track and they ran. William Byron won that race, obviously the last year of the Gen 6 car, so you can't really look too much into that. But how's the track going to react? What are the speeds going to be like? Certain cars, certain teams, they perform better when the track is slicker, when the track is uh grippier. So, I like, again, practice. We talk about this all the time, but practice is important. We got to see how cars are going to react to the different track temperatures, to the different weather. It's going to be warm. Obviously, it's Miami, but when you have the favorites too, when you have 4 guys, 5 guys essentially at most books squeezed underneath that 10-1 number, how the hell are you going to get any action on these dudes? Because what if they biff it in practice and qualifying?
Yeah.
And expanding out on this, something else I was really intrigued about asking drivers this last weekend in Vegas is the new qualifying format. A guy like Ryan Blaney, he's going to be one of the first few guys out, having wrecked and had poor performances in 2 consecutive races now. So the metric is going to score him pretty low when you factor in that with his current standings in the season-long standings. So why do you want to get in on Blaney at 7 when, even if he qualifies well relative to the guys around him, he's going to be going so early out in the session that he's going to get surpassed by half the field almost, like you could see Blaney starting 20th again. And then you probably get the same number post practice, and you got to see him hit the track. So I don't think you can get in on him. And then Larson, like, what's the shortest he's going to go off? 4? Unless Reddick, Blaney, Byron, and Bell all suck, like royally suck in practice and then suck in qualifying, this number is not going to get that much shorter. I'm not touching 3 right now. That's for damn sure. And then 5, I'd rather wait.
I say if you have access to Fanduel, I Blaney is sort of interesting just because of the numbers everywhere else. Larson similar, but yeah, I see what you're saying. Like there is cause for pause. I will say Chastain told us that he likes the new format and thinks he would have qualified on the pole a lot more if there was only one round instead of this like multiple rounds. It'll be interesting though, as you pointed out, to see how qualifying goes. But we saw McDowell go out relatively early and stick it on the pole and was
but I
there.
mean, he was like at the very beginning of Group B. He wasn't in Group A.
That's true.
Which I'm assuming Blaney is probably going to be a part of that first half of the field to go out because of these last 2 weekends of wrecking and just having really bad finishes.
Yeah. The books are definitely squeezing the outright market. Like 850 on Byron. Like there was 10 on him yesterday. Yeah, yesterday.
10's still available at ESPN right now, by the way. But even that, like, you're talking Byron. Sorry, my mistake. Bell is still 10. Byron, I will admit, I fired on that 10 number.
Yeah.
He's going to be one of the last, if not the last guy to go in qualifying. He has a pole here. He's won here, obviously, that 2021 race. Yeah. This number is going to get shorter. It's not going to be around.
Well, and he's 5 or 6 a lot of places. So if you can get, 9 or 10, that's a great number. And we expect him to qualify well. We expect him to run up front most of the day and be in contention when it matters most. So I'm happy to add him to my card most weeks, especially if I can get double digits. So if we're gonna go beyond there, let's talk that next range because it's hard when you've got so many of the best drivers all clumped up and they're all kind of the same number and figuring out how to split it and make sure you're betting enough to actually win money and not just cover all your other bets. Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, Ross Chastain, Alex Bowman, Kyle Busch is kind of that next range, and then we get into like Bubba and Hocevar and stuff. Those guys are a little longer, so we'll save them. But any interest in the Chase, Joey, Ross, Bowman, Busch group?
Honestly, the only guy that I'd be considering from that range is probably Alex Bowman, simply because of the performances that he's had this year and knowing he's going to be going out late in qualifying and probably grabbing a top 10 starting position, shortening this number probably around that 20 to 15 to 18 mark at everywhere. So if you could get, 25, 30, I don't hate grabbing that. But realistically though, I mean, do I think he's a legit race winning contender when you put him up against the guys that we expect to run a front? No. So, if you have limited units and you're trying to pigeonhole your bets, like I don't mind just avoiding the entire outright board and just waiting to just grab a favorite post practice and qualifying, or even just waiting live this week and grabbing somebody that you can tell right away has the car that's able to move through the field.
Yeah. Just confirming a number on Rivers. I am going to, I think, take 2 bets in this range. If I can get the stupid bet thing to work. Here we go. Motorsports.
And then as Kyle shops here, the other one that we've seen some significant line movement with that I have zero understanding as to why this keeps happening. The same way this happened with Kyle Busch in Phoenix. Why the hell are people betting Chase Elliott? What has he
Because his
shown?
name is Chase Elliott.
But what has he shown at 1.5 outside of Texas that is going to convince you that he's going to win this race? Yes, he led 80 plus laps last year, but again, that was the playoffs. That was just the way that race set up for him. Prior to that, he had 0 laps led in the first 2 next gen races. He had 3 consecutive finishes of 14th or 15th, and he only has 2 top 10s in the last 6 trips to Homestead. So why are we looking at Chase Elliott as a guy that we're excited to bet, even at this 20 number, when you could go right below him and bet Joey Logano, who was pretty damn good here early in his career. They've been faster on Saturdays than pretty much everybody else in the series. And that he's the strategy maestro in the sport. And if we get weird cautions and shit like that, Big Ball Paul and Joey Logano, they're going to be the first team out there to be able to maneuver their way and get track position for a late race restart. I don't understand everybody still being enamored with Chase Elliott, who is a habitual, like 5th through 8th place car and is going to need luck in order to win races. He does not have the race winning speed.
Because his name is Chase Elliott.
I get it.
Like
It's just
because his name is Kyle Busch.
Yeah, but from a
lining
betting
up to bet.
perspective,
Yeah, but that's not everybody's that analytical, Brian. We've talked about this.
I guess, yeah. I don't know.
I added 2 bets.
Oh no.
I added Ross Chastain at 25.
Uh-oh.
And I added Alex Bowman at 30.
Yeah, see, I like the Bowman one for sure.
I'm just playing numbers. If he's between 16 and 20 everywhere and I can get a 25, I'm going to take it. Watermelon Man showed speed last week. I think Trackhouse is figuring stuff out. Friggin' Daniel Suarez was top 5. And I know we talked about weird, but like they were also awesome at Phoenix. And if Suarez doesn't get legged, maybe he's running up near the front.
That's a good point.
Instead of crashed. And I know he
Yeah.
was on a little bit of a different strategy with tires and stuff, but I mean, I think he's definitely a top 10 car, maybe a top 5 car. He was running in the top 5 a lot of the day. I think they're figuring stuff out at Trackhouse. I think they're pulling their head out of their ass a little bit. And if I can get a 25 and win the market 16, a lot of places, there's a couple 19 and 20s. I'm just going to play the number game at this point. Expect both of them who have been finishing strong to be later in qualifying, to perform well in qualifying, and for those numbers to be shorter. Maybe I'll Ty Gibbs myself away into something that is basically the same or shorter than what I can get on race day. But I'm not taking a huge stance on either of them either. I'm just grabbing a little bit and seeing what happens in practice and qualifying.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I mean, kind of the way I was comparing Joey Logano and Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain is a much better play at this point of the week than Chase Elliott is. And to be real, Elliott should probably be priced in the same range as his teammate Alex Bowman and Ross Chastain. He's shortened because, as you said, he's Chase Elliott. He's the most popular driver out there, and the books know that he's going to take handle probably regardless of where he is, unless he's priced as one of the favorites right now. But so yeah, I like both of those. Bowman more so just because of the HMS factor, I guess, and he's just been so solid to begin this season, and he fits the narrative of the bees winning. So,
Yeah.
There's the only 3 winners in the sport have last names with B's, and then you're going to tell me we're going to get Blaney, Bowman, Busher. Like, I mean, if that happens again, it would not surprise me.
Yeah. And then we can get into Bubba or Brad and see if we want to get real wild.
Oh gosh, and then we're changing the rules that it's first names.
No, we just said it has to start with it just has to be a B involved. No one said that it has to be last name B.
You mean like Carson Hocevar, how he added a silent B to his last name? His name is Carson Bosevar. Uh,
I do wonder. I know we talk about how all these markets are kind of individual markets and they don't necessarily
mhm.
get impacted, but Chase is pretty rock solid in that like 5 to 8 range most weeks. And I wonder if the books like they have a formula that kind of they put their outright odds in and it kind of figures everything else out for them. And knowing that they want to shorten the top 3, top 5, top 10 numbers, they shorten his outright a little bit, knowing they're going to get money anyways. And then it kind of figures that out. And then if they need to extend his outright odds after the fact, they can do that. But that's just me pulling shit out of my ass.
Yeah, and I think probably at the end of the day, we're all going to look back on this and think how redundant all of these conversations were after Kyle Larson laps the field and
Yeah.
finally finds victory lane at the track that realistically the only guy that can compete with him on the high line is probably Tyler Reddick. And going back to the
Yeah.
conversation of when this race is ran, I don't think Reddick makes the same move that he did last year to win this weekend, knowing that he's got a full slate of they got 20 races to go in the regular season, and a second or third place finish is much better than a DNF.
And we'll see, like, we talked to you were specifically asking drivers about the new qualifying system and like,
Mhm.
do you change the way you race on race day, and does it impact things? And are you thinking about next week? And a lot of them are like, no, not really. It doesn't matter. It's all fine. But I
Well,
do
let's
want,
see as the season
well, that's
progresses.
what I'm saying. I want to see when push comes to shove and they need to get around somebody to get a race win, and it's March or April or May. Are they pushing and doing what Almirola-ing themselves into victory lane, or are they
Yeah,
comfortable getting that second, locking in those points, making sure they have a good qualifying spot for the next week and going from there?
yeah, and I think when you look at that, one of the first things that came to mind when I started asking these questions is drivers say like a Tyler Reddick, for instance, who when we go to Martinsville in a few weeks, he knows he stinks there. So would he be more inclined to try to set himself up for a good qualifying position at a track where track position can help you maintain and you just not fall, beyond the 8 ball? And so does that affect how he races at Darlington or whatever race we're at the week before, maybe taking less risk so that way he's not putting himself even further behind the rest of the field going into a
Yeah.
track that he's not so good at? Like, I think a lot of that stuff as the season progresses is definitely going to come into play, especially as we get closer to the playoffs and guys needing stage points and all that type of stuff to make their way through the standings.
Yeah, I also wondered too. I'm looking at because the Darlington race is the round of 16, and he could be like, let's try and figure some stuff out. So when we come back here for the playoffs, we can have a top 5-ish finish and be in a really good spot as we roll through the round of 16, knowing that he's probably gonna be a playoff driver. He's probably gonna be in a good spot in the round of 16 and not really need to push it and try and win the race. But they say they're trying to win every week, and I think sometimes they do, but I think sometimes they have an understanding of where their skills may or may not lie, and kind of going from there.
Yeah.
Is there any longer shots? I mean, people are betting
Yep.
Chase Briscoe this week, which is insane.
Yeah.
Anybody jumping out to you as longer shots that you're like, you know what, I'll take a shot now, and when we recap Saturday night, that number could be half of what it is, a third of what it is.
Okay, there's two guys. I'll do the second one first because it's really gross. But Austin Dillon, 250 to 1 at some at places I've seen. I know RCR has been atrocious this year, but at some points in Vegas, they did look decently fast. Austin Dillon actually has loved Homestead throughout his career. It's actually the track, I tweeted it out, that holds his best career average finish of inside 13th. He's got numerous top 10s here. And, this is a guy that when nobody expected it, popped at Richmond last year. And we just saw Josh Berry win at a track that nobody really expected him to win at. And if you were to tell me that we got some shenanigans late in the race and Austin Dillon had kind of made his way to the front and he wins on a late race restart by aero blocking or putting somebody into the wall to get the win, I wouldn't be that surprised. And at 250 to 1, you could play $1 on this and have a fun time with it. And then, of course, the other one, AJ Allmendinger, dude's a machine here at Homestead. He got another top 10 at Las Vegas, a track that everybody was kind of high on him. I definitely missed the boat. He was 4-1 top 10 prior to us going green, and I kind of scared myself off of that for no reason. But the biggest reason why I think Dinger is really intriguing this week is in the last 2 Gen 7 races that we've ran here, he started outside the top 20 and still came home inside the top 10. Now coming off another solid run at Las Vegas, he's probably going to be qualifying a little bit later in the session than he's normally used to. And being that Chevy has been kind of quick in these qualifying sessions, Dinger might wind up with one of his better qualifying spots that he's had in Homestead in quite some time. And for a guy who top 10s here like it's nothing, in the same conversation I just had about Austin Dillon just being there at the end, it would not surprise me one bit that Dinger takes some risks, gets off cycle, and maybe hits the caution at the right time, very similar to how Tyler Reddick hit the jackpot last year and is the one leading us to green in an overtime restart, going for a win.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I mean, the last 3 finishes at this track have been 3rd, 5th, and 8th. As you mentioned, he will have a better potential starting, or a
Hypothetically, yeah.
better opportunity for a better
Yes.
starting position.
Yep.
We're waiting for top 10s to come trickling out, but I think that's a great bet. He's over the last 3 trips to Homestead, he's the only one who's top 10 in all 3. Chris Bell hasn't done that. Tyler Reddick hasn't done that. Kyle Larson hasn't done that. So even as good as all those guys are, they haven't gone 3 for 3 for top 10s. So I like the Dinger call. I'm probably not betting the outright, but I am going to be. He will be prominently featured on my betting card, and then I will be asking myself in stage 3 why I got so aggressive on a guy like AJ Allmendinger when he's screaming at his crew chief and sitting on the side of the road and no wheels on the car, and just hopefully he doesn't get stuck in Chase Briscoe's pit box and then his pit crew over tightens his tires and ruins his day too.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of that, I can't believe that they actually allowed a driver to stop in somebody else's box, even though it's part of their team.
Well, they got penalized, but they didn't get as bad of a penalty as the tires coming off. Plus, the tires coming off would have basically ruined his day. So it's better to get penalized than it is to like not have back tires like Chase Briscoe. Which amazing that they were able to keep the tires on Bell's car, because I figured after the way his pit crew has been working the past couple weeks, I thought for sure things were going to go poorly for them. Any other outright stuff you have any interest in? Anybody you're adding to the card? Where are you at in terms of outrights? Are you adding anything this week? Well, it looks like Brian.
When they're squeezing the top.
We lost you for a second, Brian. Why don't you bring it back and say that again?
Oh. Yeah, so I'm not really looking at much outside of the Dinger and the Dillon, like super long odds. And then, as I said, here in Vegas, I was fortunate enough to be awake when Superbook dropped their numbers. I grabbed Byron at 10, which was shortly thereafter bet down to 8. And you could get him at 8.5, I think at FanDuel right now. So I think that's okay. Just knowing that amongst the favorites, he's going to have the most opportunistic qualifying spot. just based on his finishes and how solid he is here. So he's the only guy near the top that I'd even consider at this point.
Yeah, I think Byron 8.5 is fine. I think Larson at 5 is fine. He could be 350 most places, and if you want to squeeze in a little value, I don't hate it. But if you'd
Yeah,
rather
but
wait,
again, on the 5, like it's only $1.50 difference.
for
If he
some
pops
people,
up at
5 is
350.
a lot more when you're only. But like I said, if you'd rather wait and bet 350 knowing he's fast, then 5. And like I said, if you can only get 350 or 4, then I'm not doing it. But 5 is different than market, so I'm into it. Let's look at a few head-to-heads and see if there is any value. It seems like a lot of these have kind of gotten juiced, at least so far. So we have Keselowski versus Busher, Larson versus Blaney, Bubba versus Hocevar, Logano versus Chastain, and Reddick versus Byron. Any of those calling out to you?
Well, if I didn't already have Byron at 10, as much as we love Red Dog on this show, I would definitely consider taking Byron at plus 110 here. In the sport right now, I don't think there's a single guy who can compete with the level of consistency that the 24 team is able to bring on a week to week basis when you factor in all aspects of a race weekend, whether it's practice, qualifying, pit road, on top of the box, his spotter, his performance on the track. Like Byron has been so solid this year, and you're going to give me plus money against the guy who, yes, he's been tremendous in Miami. He's probably the second best guy only because the preferred line is ripping the wall, but also has a little bit of Kyle Larson like tendencies of checkers or wreckers, getting a little bit too aggressive, maybe not making the correct move at the right time. And then the issue of his pit crew. Last week in Vegas, we saw it numerous times. I don't think there was one stop that the 45 team gained Reddick spots on pit road. He either maintained or lost positions. And I think that's something when you come to the end of the race scenario, and with him also having to qualify a little bit further back, if he doesn't grab the pole, he's not going to get the preferred pit box. Late race, he could get stuck. And so you're going to give me plus 110 with Byron. That's something I would consider.
Yeah, I like that shout, especially because when it's coming down to the end and they're both running in the top 5, and as you mentioned, Reddick's pit crew does something stupid and it just costs him half a second. When you're dealing with such small margins with the
Yep.
elite options, you can't do that. You just can't. So I like that shout quite a bit. Um, a lot of them are kind of juiced the wrong way or just overly played. We talked about this one a bunch. Larson was interesting when this kind of opened, but especially given where Blaney's going to start. But now at this point, minus 130 is just too heavy to lay. Let's go over here because there is a few that I want to jump on. Dinger plus 115 over Carson Hocevar. Maybe they both end up crashing each other out, but we talked about how good Dinger has been here, and we know what Hocevar's upside is, but we also know how the shenanigans he likes to get into. You're giving me plus money on a guy that is just rock solid in the top 10. I'm going to take it.
Yeah. This is kind of a similar argument with Reddick versus Byron. Dinger is the much more consistent driver of the two with similar ceilings here at this track, but the variance is much larger for Carson Hocevar, who is very much like a early portion of career Ross Chastain / Kyle Larson.
/ Joey Logano. What about Denny at plus 125 against Blaney? I know Blaney could be awesome,
No,
but maybe no.
There's no speed in the JGR cars to tell me that I want to take Denny against probably the fastest car each of the last 2 weeks having to get through the field.
That's fair. I was just thinking of an arbitrage opportunity and that number flips, but I
I
think you're
love
right.
Denny this week. I think he'll be solid because he's really good here at Homestead, but just the lack of speed from JGR, I'm not getting involved on any of their sides.
What about Watermelon Man 4-1 against Bell, Hamlin, and Elliott? If you're considering him outright, this is an interesting way to get because you expect these guys to be in front of him. But we talked about our worry for JGR. Maybe Bell figures it out and makes me look stupid. And then we know Chase will be fine. But if Ross has a top 5 day, he wins this. Maybe it's top 7. I don't know. Maybe I'm scrounging for stuff I don't need to be scrounging for. It's a weird
Well,
point
I
right
can
now.
actually do a quick so obviously one of the cool things about Win the Race is you can look at fair market values for matchups, outrights, placements. If you haven't already, check it out. They Win the Race is offering month-to-month subscriptions. You join right now, you're going to get Miami, Darlington, Martinsville, 3 really good, really bettable races. So highly recommended there. But when you go and you look at that, so like Chastain is fair market value favorite over Elliott, but he's a very large dog over Denny and Christopher Bell. So I'm actually adding it to the card right now over on ESPN Bet plus 105. But Chastain over Elliott is something that I would much rather play because now I'm not getting involved with either of the amoebas, which is better known as JGR right now. It's kind of like I said, I'm trying to avoid that stable as much as I can.
Yeah. And that's why we have you around, Brian, to make sure I don't do stupid things. Yeah, I like that.
I mean, especially since we're on the AACE
Average.
trend again
But
for the
yeah,
9th,
but Ross has to be better than average, so
which he
I
does
added go
fairly
ahead.
frequent.
Yeah, that's true. I did get Bubba over Bush at -110 this morning. It's moved the other way, and
So
I
you
don't think
did.
I'm
So you did bet that.
oh yeah. And it's -120, -130, a lot of places. I'm not betting it at that point.
No.
Um, I do like the Ross. Bowman over Logano.
So that is something I was Kyle and I were chatting prior to jumping on here. There's that same matchup is available at one of the books here in Vegas, and that was one of the first ones that kind of piqued my interest just based on current form and being solid. I do think Logano holds a little bit of an advantage over Bowman in that matchup, but again, you're getting it at even. I don't know if it's as intriguing, but like I'm able to get plus 110 at that point. I think that's something you can fire on because I think they're fairly equal in terms of ability at this track of late in particular.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, our friends over at Win the Race have the fair market value. So jump in and grab that. You can also get DFS tools. You also get in the Discord, so you can chat with us and all the other really, really smart people kicking around in there. But um, plus, even's about right. It's not quite perfect, but it's about right. So
Yeah.
I just betting against Logano is always scary because even when he doesn't have a good car, he still manages to do a lot more than you'd expect. So it's kind of
Well,
frustrating.
perfect example was Las Vegas, how he did exactly what I had anticipated. Once he got in dirty air, he kind of fell down the running order. And then somehow, some effing way, it never fails. He found his way back towards the front on a differing strategy than most people. And at a time, there was a legit worry that they were just going to sit there and stay out and throttle down and run the thing to the end and possibly win the race. So, yeah, that's the worry with the 22 team for sure.
Yeah. Um, anything else you want to look at? See if there's anything good.
So I know going back to the Discord, there was we were having a conversation about like the fastest lap of the race. I know Caesars is offering fastest lap of the race at over under 165.5 miles per hour. And my Nostradamus like mind is trying to predict that the track is going to be grippier, so therefore a little bit faster than we've seen the last couple of times in the Gen 7 car because of when the race is being ran. And so I went back and I looked at the fastest laps last year. Both Tyler Reddick and Ryan Blaney were able to run 165.8 something for Reddick and 165.587, I think, for Blaney, which would hit the over. But again, like, you're really grasping at straws at a number that's posted so tight and us really not having a good idea about how this race is going to run with it being at a different time of the year. So I don't think you can confidently bet either side of that.
Is there any value in the top Ford market with Ryan Blaney being minus money to win? Also, Josh Berry is just now up here. That's
Right.
what we do. Like, I know it's been a good start to the season. I know he won in Vegas, but he wasn't expected to win there. He's 45 to 1 for a reason.
They've been fast though.
They have been fast. Are we here's what I want to know down in the comments. Obviously, like what you're betting, who stands out, all that stuff. But when we're talking in September, are we talking about Josh Berry as holy hell, this guy has really made a step. The Wood brothers are their alliance with Penske and just general figuring stuff out. Their team has got something serious going here. And I'm not saying he's gonna be in the Blaney or Reddick or even like kind of that next tier. But are we going into the playoffs thinking this guy should be in the top 8 when we get in or be in the round of 8? Or are we going, how the hell did he win in Vegas? He's been like barely top 20 the rest of the way. Like where are you at with Barry in terms of expectations? Because he's been fast, he's been consistent, he's qualified well, even when he didn't have a great qualifying spot. Wood
Yep.
brothers have brought speed to the track. They're showing up at places we don't expect them to show up. Outside of Coda, they've been pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Are we talking about Barry in the 21 as a maybe not like a legit cup contender, but
Hey,
it's 150 to 1 and we're going into the round of 8 and I could see $10 being worse spent.
yeah, no, I think that's going to be a lot of fun following what the 21 team does here going forward. And full disclosure, I did grab Josh Berry to win the poll at 20 to 1 this week here at Homestead, simply based off of his qualifying speed to begin the year. I mean, as Kyle alluded to, outside of Coda, this team has been fast as hell. I mean, one of the fastest cars every Saturday when we're doing qualifying sessions. He's maintained track position at 2 different types of ovals now, 2 in a row. Phoenix, a racetrack that we had traditionally said, oh, this is a Josh Berry type track. He's good at shorter flats coming from a short track background. And then all of a sudden he pops at a mile and a half in Las Vegas. Like, last year we gave a bunch of shit to Wood Brothers because Harrison Burton was like at best, top 20 car.
Right.
Clearly, either they've stepped their game up and bringing more to the table, or Josh Berry is that much of a upgrade in driver talent at a multitude of tracks that this team is going to hang around for a while, very similar to how we saw Ryan Blaney kind of take a major step forward in his career when he was able to get this team, as a competitor week in and week out. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think this might be the last week that you're going to see like longer numbers on him if he performs again up at the front. And then I do think he's going to be priced at that 20 to 18 range going forward, kind of how we saw Ty Gibbs see his numbers shoot down when he was consistently running inside the top 10 or as a top 10 car week in and week out last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the question is he more Harrison Burton at Wood Brothers or is he more Ryan Blaney at Wood Brothers? And they were talking about at the presser after he won, like how excited they are because the last time the Wood Brothers driver had kind of gotten that first win, it was towards the end of the season when they were basically on their way out of the race team. And now they
Yeah.
have a win in the bank. They can figure some stuff out. And it seems, at least for now, like Josh Berry might be there for a little while. So they can kind of plan as a team to get better as a whole and not just kind of figure stuff out. That being said, maybe there's an opening at Penske, maybe there's an opening at JGR.
You're just trying to push Austin out of that team,
I
aren't
like
you?
silly season, man. I'm gonna drive the narrative.
Yeah.
Maybe Danielson is in one of those rides. I don't know.
Hey,
But
hey, what if Josh Berry say the Austin Cindric stuff does come to fruition and say he's out at Penske, Josh Berry takes that ride. We already kind of are anticipating Connor Zilic taking the 99 seat. Maybe Suarez slides right into that 21.
yeah, or maybe Suarez, maybe Josh Berry and Austin Cindric swap seats next year.
I don't see that happening. I wouldn't see Cindric being okay, like basically being relegated to
Well,
Penske's
does he?
like
Would he rather get relegated to Xfinity or trucks?
maybe. Well, okay. So I think that's a legit concern amongst drivers. And would you rather be competitive week in and week out in the Xfinity series, or would you rather be a middling driver and somebody who maybe has a shot to win if everything falls right in the Cup Series during your career? I think that's probably why a guy like Justin Allgaier, who hasn't been able to secure a top tier ride in the Cup Series, has stuck around so long in Xfinity, because year in and year out, he's considered amongst the favorites to win the championship, win races week in, week out, you know?
Yeah, I think you'd rather be Todd Gilliland or Michael McDowell instead of Justin Allgaier. But
I don't know, man.
let me know
Allgaier's
in the
got it.
comments if I'm wrong. What do you guys think? Would you rather be an elite Xfinity driver that maybe never gets a real shot, or would you rather be in the Cup Series and hope that everything comes together at a super speedway or somewhere where you're really good and maybe you win a legit race? I think it's pretty clearly being in the Cup Series, but I've been wrong before and I'm sure I'll be wrong again. All right, Brian, we've reached the end. I have Chastain, I have Bowman, and I have Dinger over Hocevar. You only have Chastain over Elliott at this point. Anything else you're considering? Anything else you're looking for? I know we both want to add the Dinger top 10 as soon as that becomes available. Any other bets in the back of your mind that you're like, I could see that going on the card between now and before practice and qualifying?
Well, something you and I talked about in the offseason, and something I kind of lamented last year, was kind of the inability for me and you to divulge some of the actual bets that we were making on the side, whether it be offshore or books here in Vegas. I will say I have a pretty hefty matchup of Kyle Larson minus 110 over Ryan Blaney, with the expectation, and I think something we need to start doing here going forward, pre-practice and post-practice picks to win the race. It's the reason why I'm going to pick Kyle Larson. I just can't get down on that number right now, because I don't think it's going to shorten too far from whatever the longest is right now, 5. I'd rather bet 4 and know he's really fast, or even 3.5 in stage 2 when he's avoided wrecking at that point of the race.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely reasonable, and I think it's something to think about when you're making your bets. Like, do you have a little limited bankroll and you want to take a couple shots and that's kind of it? Then I would say placing anything prior to practice and qualifying, unless the number is egregious, probably doesn't make a lot of sense. I think you wait and I think you let everything sort out, and then you find the value of the fast cars. Now, if you're able to put a little more down, you want to play the arbitrage game, lock in some points, lock in some cash,
Yep.
then you look at numbers, you say, okay, what could change between now and practice and qualifying? and then maybe you get in on something early, and then once practice and qualifying happens and numbers flip, then you bet the other side, and then you lock in your 20 cents or whatever it is, and you call it a day. So think about how you want to get down, and I think it's, Brian and I, while we both bet NASCAR, we bet it differently, I would say. So it's good to have a couple different opinions, and just know yourself. You don't need to fire at 100 different bets before the season starts or before the race starts.
Yeah.
If you're like, I have $200 or $100 and that's all I want to bet the whole race weekend, I think unless you see something crazy like top 10s dropped and you think AJ Allmendinger should be like inside 2-1, and that's the good thing about the win the race tools too, is it kind of gives you a fair market value, and it drops at like 6-1, and you want to hit that makes sense. If you see a driver that you think can win the race and it's 35 and you expect them to qualify well, and you think by the time we go off on race day it's 10-1, you can hit that, and then just kind of be patient with the rest of your bets. So understand where you're at, and understand weeks where you're like, you know what, I don't have any money to gamble this week, and that's fine too. You can jump in our Grid Rivals pool. You can do other kinds of things, and you can just have some fun watching races. So keep that in mind as you bet different things and look at the card and all that good stuff. But
Who you got, Kyle?
who wins?
Yeah.
Ooh. I mean, do we want the? I mean, I guess the right answer is Kyle Larson.
I mean, it's only right if he winds up winning. I mean,
Tyler Reddick wins, gets his first one in the season.
that would be beautiful. I hope you're right and I'm wrong, but
45 is ripping the high line and winning the race.
all right. We'll see. When we reconvene on Saturday, we'll see if our minds have been adjusted at all.
Oh, I'm sure they will be, but that's the beautiful part. Brian will be on site, so make sure you're following all the socials. AOP Podcast on Instagram, FPAOP on Twitter. He'll be posting all kinds of fun stuff. We'll be chatting throughout the week. Make sure you're following both of us at Notorious KRO, at Brian_Twining. As more markets become available, as more opportunities come out, as we see stuff we like, we'll share it for sure. Whether it's on offshore, onshore, near the shore, the shoreline, whatever you want to call it. We'll try and give you some information, some numbers, some interesting options that may or may not be jumping out to us. That's Brian Twining live from Las Vegas. Kyle, I'm back at home base. We'll talk to you Sunday morning. Make sure you're subscribed to all this stuff. Make sure you jump into our free newsletter as well, aoppodcast.substack.com. aoppodcast.substack.com. Link is in the description. Completely free newsletter. Comes out every race day. DraftKings thoughts, betting thoughts, grid rival picks, full betting card, all that
Don't
stuff.
forget on Grid Rival, use code AOP25 to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Their over-under finishing position props are fantastic. You could also do driver matchups with positions factored in to these things, which it's very similar to betting odds. You can go in there and try to shop for potential pre-practice and qualifying CLV on these as well.
Yep, and a great opportunity for those of you in non-legal states. It's a nice way to get a little piece of action without getting when you can't get access to books. So that's Brian. I'm Kyle. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We'll talk to you next